So far, 2026 has been a big year for movies. There's been the success of horror films like Backrooms
I found something in the store.
and Obsession.
Bear, I love you so much. I don't think I could live without you.
There have been movies targeted by the culture wars like The Odyssey.
No one could stand between me and home. Not even the gods.
And there are smaller films that have gotten critical acclaim like Camp.
See, and that's why I was so excited when I saw Emily sitting there on her bunk. I thought, amazing. Another gorgeous weirdo like the rest of us.
Oh, yeah.
All those films are being released at a landscape that seems hopeful for theaters. In the first half of the year, films in the US have earned more at the box office than in any year since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. From Connecticut Public Radio, this is Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. This hour, we're talking about the year in film with our fourth annual summer movie panel. Nadira Goff is staff writer at Slate. Walter Chow is senior film critic for FilmFreakCentral.net and author of a Walter Hill film, Tragedy and Masculinity in the Films of Walter Hill. And James Hanley is co-founder of the independent movie theater Cine Studio in Hartford. It's so great to have all of you with us on Disrupted again.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
How exciting to be here.
Let's start our conversation by talking about one of the most anticipated films of this year, that is The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan. It will be released on the same day that this conversation will air, which is July 17th. So I think we should get a little, payout if people go to see it based on this conversation. Nadira, what should we expect, or what are you expecting with this film?
Oh gosh, as a big Nolan fan, I'm expecting some incredible set pieces. I'm expecting to be slightly confused, though thoroughly pleased throughout the entire experience. And I am expecting discourse. I'm expecting large discourse about adapting a classic and also, once again, more culture wars dust up about Lupita Nyong'o cast as Helen of Troy and Zendaya cast as Athena and all of the diverse actors in the film and the roles that they are portraying. And I'm also expecting Robert Pattinson to just keep giving us the little weird but best performance he's ever given to date. I hope that we can still continue to say that. But I think it'll be a meal.
Walter, we need more meals with film and not feel like we're just being served one option and force-fed what we have to see there. Nadira just laid out a number of things. One, in terms of the discourse, the confusion, the brewing controversy already over who gets to play characters from mythology. It sounds a lot like the outrage over The Little Mermaid, because how dare this mythical character look like what other people think it should not. What are you focusing on or looking forward to with this film?
I'm not a huge Christopher Nolan fan, but I think he's perfect for this kind of film. He's really good at iconography. He's like Zack Snyder in that way, I think. And so he's perfect for Batman. He's perfect for figures that are larger than life. Other than Zack Snyder, I couldn't imagine a better person to make the Odyssey film. And I think it's really a shame. The culture wars are always a shame, honestly, but I think it's really a shame in particular with the Odyssey because the source material was meant to be malleable. This is the kind of thing that these myth makers like Homer and Virgil and Ovid were adapting old stories and old songs for modern audiences. They're constantly doing that. They're revising the way that they're telling. They're doing all these things. The only person who didn't mention that's causing a stir is Elliot Page, who's cast as Achilles, the great warrior. And, Achilles, though, has been scholarly study over the years, over the decades and centuries, that he might be gay and might be involved in a relationship with Patroclus. So these things are not new to our conversation. This isn't some kind of hey, it's 2026, let's stir things up. This is actually the way that we're supposed to tell this. There was a similar liner dressed up when the Coen brothers did the Odyssey, a film called "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And the Coens were really, made a lot of waves by saying, "Hey, we never even read the book." But the Odyssey is a collection of songs and stories of a region and a time, and so was "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" So in a way, that adaptation was more honorable to the source material than any other that had really come before. Just as I expect this to be. I think there's going to be some really kind of interesting stuff. It looks to me like a horror film. I think for all the culture war that's around it, despite all of it, it's going to make $1 billion in the first couple
it's
of
going to
weeks.
make so much money.
So I mean, it's one of those things that's really kind of a refutation of this sort of the loudest people in the room are getting all the attention towards this. But just like always, I think this refutes that. This says actually people want to see this. Actually, they want to see, one of our archetypal stories about alienation, about individuation, about this idea that we leave home for most of our lives looking for something, and then we come home.
And Nolan's work has been really steeped in the hero's journey. Like if there's one thing he's good at, right? It's making a hero.
Yeah, and one thing he's bad at is plot. And so this is already done for him.
It's already been worked out for him.
He doesn't have to worry about like dealing with all that stuff. So yeah, exactly.
The other piece that I'm looking forward to with this film is something, James, that you are very well versed in, and that's the technical side of filmmaking. Yeah. Talk to us, James, about that technical side that you're looking forward to.
Well, Christopher Nolan almost single-handedly, to begin with at least, and certainly brought it to fruition with the Odyssey. He made this film entirely with IMAX 70mm, which is the largest high-definition format that is in major use. And what is kind of interesting was that this format had actually started to disappear with digital, that IMAX started opening many more theaters with digital IMAX, which was derided by many fans as Limax, because it didn't really have the extraordinary capability that 70mm filming on physical film has. And Christopher Nolan really took it to the final degree, if you like, by actually convincing IMAX to make more cameras, make them lighter, and be actually able to film the entire film with it. And there is, I think, of the theaters around the world, there's about 30 of them that will play in IMAX, which is a horizontal 70mm. And I think a year ago, the first theaters that put up tickets for sale for the first week of the 70mm IMAX, they sold out within minutes. So people know about the technical side of this, that it produces an experience that is enveloping. And I think it's a fascinating parallel to the whole idea of myth, actually, that film itself is the sort of modern mythology in a way. And it links with the outrage in some tiny quarters about who plays who. And I think one of the fascinating things about myth is that it's not based necessarily on stereotype or race or particular origin. It's actually telling a story to make a point. And when you tell the story to make a point, you have a lot of freedom to do things. And I think that Christopher Nolan and his casting director, for example, cast a very wide net to try and not to use orthodoxy in telling the story and not to be trapped into having to have what made it seem real, because it's not real.
Dara, let's keep that theme of controversy going in film. Sure. I think what James has laid out, the story that is told is important. How that story is told is important. And we are increasingly seeing who's telling that story becoming a source of controversy. One of the films that follows in that vein, a much smaller film, but no stranger to controversy and conversation, is the film Is God Is. It is the directorial debut by Alicia Harris. Tell us a little bit about this film and why there is a backlash to this film.
Sure. This film is most likely going to wind up being one of my favorites of the year. It is about two twin sisters who go on this sort of revenge, honestly, to pair with what we were talking about, what I've been dubbing as a Hellenistic epic, right? A revenge tale where they travel through the Black South with the one goal to kill their father, their abusive father. And much like many movies in the past that have been centered around the Black woman and her right to revenge or her desire for revenge or bloodthirst, this has received a lot of pushback. Specifically, there are or were a lot of Black men who saw this movie, or I mean, I would bet that many of them didn't even see it, right? But heard about this movie and heard that the villain, the father, played by Sterling K. Brown, in one of the best times I've ever seen him, truly menacing and terrifying, was a little bit too one note, that his one role as one Black father in one movie was a little bit too typecasting and too needlessly violent and rudimentary, I guess. And this whole pushback echoed a much larger pushback that happened around the time of The Color Purple. When The Color Purple came out, it received a lot of very similar criticism. It was boycotted by the NAACP and a bunch of other organizations, basically saying the exact same thing, that all of the Black men in the movie were just only violent and they had nothing else to give, and that was their only presence. And I think in all of this is a really large conversation about, do Black women get to have revenge on screen? Do they get to have their Kill Bill moment, right? Especially if the revenge that they're seeking is for harm that was done to them by a Black man. And if you are going to tell stories within a community, then the heroes and the villains are most likely going to come from that community. And it would be a disservice to say that women can't tell stories about how they were abused, no matter who they were abused by, but particularly when the call's coming from inside the house, I think. Because I think it's a harder conversation to have, but perhaps a more necessary conversation to have. And I do think it ruffled a lot of feathers, particularly for Black women watching and appreciating the film, because it felt like, well, gosh, if we can't even have this outlet to express the ways that we've been hurt or harmed, then where can we go to sort of get some of that catharsis? But what is sort of even more frustrating than all of that is that it's actually just a really good movie. I think the third act maybe needed a little bit of work, but it's beautiful. It's funny. It's violent. It's gory, but it has a through line of sisterly love and bonding to it that I think is really heartwarming. And through it all, I think the most miraculous part about it are these sort of depictions of caricatures you would meet as they travel throughout the Black South. And they're so hilariously skewered, but with love, like the type of love and skewering that you can only combine if you really understand who your subject is, where all great comedy should come from. And yeah, I think the movie has so many more merits than its depictions of one man.
That was Nadira Goff, staff writer at Slate. She was joined by Walter Chow, senior film critic for FilmFreakCentral.net, and James Hanley, co-founder of Cine Studio in Hartford. Coming up, more from our summer movie panel. We'll hear about corporate consolidation in the film industry.
It's actually squeezed so much air out of the room that many of the people with independent ideas have gone elsewhere.
This is Disrupted. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. This hour, we're talking about the biggest movies of the year and the movies that should have been bigger. Walter Chow is senior film critic for FilmFreakCentral.net and a film instructor at the University of Colorado, Denver. James Hanley co-founded the independent movie theater Cine Studio in Hartford. And Nadira Goff is staff writer at Slate. Before the break, Nadira spoke about the film Is God Is. While Nadira loved the film, there was backlash from some audiences about its portrayal of Black men. Nadira compared that backlash to that of The Color Purple back in 1985. Here's more of the conversation. I will admit that, some years ago I had the honor of interviewing Danny Glover. And I said to him, you played that role in The Color Purple so well that I hated you for a very long time because he embodied that role in a way, but still there was this tenderness, that took a long time to work through. So I understand the concern of audiences who say it is so rare that we get to see ourselves on the big screen, but how do we acknowledge that without trying to muddy the waters before people experience? What do you make of this film, Walter, and the controversy or buzz surrounding it?
I love this film. I love it. I love it. I love it. As God is, it is electrifying. I felt like I was just getting a jolt of 150 watts every moment. I don't know if that's a lot or not. I'm not a scientist, but I felt like I was getting.
Sounds like a lot
But
to me.
it sounds bad, but it was the best kind of electrifying. It is alive. It is full of rage. It's full of passion, and I was not aware of the discourse around this film, and I think it's unfortunate because, I mean, I think essentially what it sounds like is, again, the abuser dictating the terms of engagement, just like, when people are saying, "Hey, don't protest that way," or "Yes, okay, this is bad, but you should do XYZ." I don't want to be told what to do anymore. If I'm angry about something, then I'm going to protest in the way that I should protest, and I want to protest. And we're in trouble because the people that are in power are the people that are damaging us, and then they're also dictating the terms in which they can be protested. And there's something sick about this that we allow, I think, too often. But I mean, As God is above and beyond everything a fabulous movie. It's a film that is about stuff. It's about sisterly love, like you say. It's about all this amazing cast of characters. Their relationship with their mother, whom they call God, and she's sort of attended to, played by the great Vivica A. Fox. And when you look at it, on the one hand, it's outrageously entertaining, right? But on the other hand, it's like, okay, wait a minute. How are we treating our mothers? How do we feel about motherhood? And it is all of these things at the same time. And you don't have to think about any of that if you don't want to. It's one of those films that it's like you could just enjoy this as like a Quentin Tarantino style, or hate to use these comparisons, but that kind of debut that is just electric. And for it to be buried under for whatever reason, not just the shots from the friendly fire, but also I imagine people aren't seeing this just because it doesn't have white people in it, just because it doesn't center, Matt Damon this time. There's a lot of stuff that's working against this film. I hope it finds its audience. I don't really know what to say about it. I watched it and I felt like I've never seen anything like this, really. I mean, the relationship between the two sisters reminded me of all things of the relationship between the siblings in BioShock 3, the video game. It's just, it's such a,
It's a deeply rich text. I
oh
think
my
that's
gosh.
the one thing that I've been
Yes.
telling everyone. Like, you can go into that movie and come away with so many things, whether it's just, oh, that was so funny, or I miss Erica Alexander being on my screen all the time, or whether it's, wow, that movie says a lot about the ways we uphold patriarchal violence and keep abusers from being held accountable. Like, you really could come out of that movie thinking so many different things.
Well, I mean, how is it that Graham Plattner was like a heartbeat away from a seat of power? How is that when everybody was screaming out, right, along the way, everybody that was not in power, it was like, listen, when somebody shows you who they are, that's who they are, right? And so, like, here we are with Is God Is, which is a film that is just about that kind of rage and that kind of feeling of impotence. And what if we could do something? It should be, it is one of the great films of this year.
James, I'm a political nerd. I've made peace with that a long time ago. Being a political scientist, I see politics in everything. And so Walter mentioned, how is it that we get this candidate for a really important race when all the signs were there? And I connect it to film a little bit here when I think about distribution, right? What are the options that are made available to us and presented as a choice when that quote unquote choice has been made by someone else or some other entities that are driven by whatever motivations they have? And then how do we reconcile through that? I think of that not just in terms of politics, but also in terms of film. What are the
Absolutely.
films that are being promoted? What are the ones that a little bit of a controversy or a side buzz can lead to a film like Is God Is having critical acclaim, but frankly, a lackluster box office? What is that? You're in Zurich right now for this conversation, which does things quite differently than in the US.
Yes.
What is that dimension of distribution that we should be thinking about as we're thinking about film?
Well, actually, I think in a way, Is God Is and a number of other films, quite a list actually of independent films recently, is actually a hopeful result of all of the horrible consolidation that has taken place in the mainstream distribution channels. You're talking about sort of rivers of money and investment, and exactly what that is and where it goes and who's being supported is very difficult. The average person has no sense of it. I mean, I worked in the industry for decades and I still don't really understand, but I do know that there was a period in the 80s when there were very successful blockbusters coming from mainstream Hollywood. They had a lot of money just hanging around. And so they actually started up independent divisions where they actually sponsored some filmmakers, including some black women, actually. They clearly were making these films for their image. They were not caring about publicity or box office or big success. They were getting some sort of what they saw as a needed respect when much of what they were producing they knew as commercial throwaways, in a sense that they might be entertaining, but they weren't going to stick around. They weren't really part of art, if you like. And black women have, in literature and film, have been excluded in so many ways. They would have their scripts modified. For example, somebody would suggest, well, you can't make the black man look so villainous, and then they have these highly paid commercial advisors who come on the set literally and change these things. And what I see as really hopeful in this particular case and in some others too is that because of this massive consolidation, including the dreaded one between Paramount and Warner's, it's actually squeezed so much air out of the room that many of the people with independent ideas have gone elsewhere. And they are actually raising money, some of them through GoFundMe. Also, you mentioned how different it is in Zurich because of the way, in Switzerland and Europe generally, because of the way films are distributed. The distributors don't control screens as they do in the US. When you book a film on a screen in the US, the distributor gets to say, well, I want my picture to play every one of your screens that you can't, like particularly Disney, they want to take over 5 screens in a complex and they want every single show. Well, in Zurich, you go to a 5-screen complex, and every one of those screens will be playing 4 or 5 different films every day. And these are films that stay in the market. So a film like Is God Is, which might first strike people as being, well, what is this kind of thing? It comes back, and comes back. And so it plays over a period of 7 or 8 months, literally. The hopeful thing I see in the US is I think there's a hint of that beginning to happen in the US with art theaters principally. Those are the outlets that are breaking away a little from the major distribution channels, and they're really getting to the community involved.
The team read this article from the LA Times, and it was by Roshan Sethi, who is a filmmaker and also an author, and talked about the crisis or the problem of representation in film right now, of saying that as the industry is going through all of these changes, the most consistent and most loyal audiences in terms of growth continue to be people of color. And yet what they see on the screen continues to look like the exact opposite. And so he argues for a different kind of conversation about the why, but also empowering audiences as not just being consumers, but of setting the standards of what they want to see and how they want to engage. Am I being off base and nerdy here? And well, let me take that off table because I'm going to be nerdy in all dimensions. But is it really unreasonable to think that given all that's happening, to have that kind of conversation and a return to film as an opportunity to engage and have conversation, not just about the film, but about representation, about context? Am I off base, or does this resonate with any of you?
No, it definitely resonates. I think it'll always resonate. And I also think one of the more understated told, or I guess just like less spoken about aspects of it, is also studios, right? We're talking about Is God Is. Is God Is was distributed by Orion, which is headed by Alana Mayo, who is a Black woman, right? And since in her tenure, we've had Hedda, we've had American Fiction, we've had Nickel Boys, right? And these are all incredible Black films, and films that went on to be nominated or win awards, and number one, spark a lot of really interesting conversation, not only about representation, but just about the themes of the movies themselves or the techniques of the films. In addition to filmmakers needing to be empowered and audiences needing to be empowered, you also need studios to be empowered. You need distributors to be able to identify these gems and to want to throw money at them to bring them to the rest of the world, right? Because without that, we really, truly don't get to see them unless you are a 20-something YouTuber and you make a short for a horror film that gets millions of views and A24 hits your line. And then all of a sudden you've made one of the biggest movies of the year, right? But it doesn't always happen like that. It doesn't often happen like that. Usually you need an Alana Mayo at Orion to see your movie and say, hey, the world needs to see this.
Well, I mean, I think when we talk about culture wars, film and culture, that aspect of culture is just one front of the entire war, because we don't really talk to each other with dignity and respect anymore. I'm just an old guy screaming at clouds now, but I'm old enough to remember when we didn't just immediately go to the nuclear option when we're talking to somebody. I wrote a review of Backrooms, one of those YouTube sensation movies that have come out, which I said, this is fine, but it's clearly done by someone who's 20 years old, because every time adults talk to each other, it sounds like a kid who's angry at their parents, is what it sounds like to me, as a 53-year-old man, an old, ugly, grown man. And I got one death threat, 2 invitations to kill myself. It's like there's no moderation and just talking about, hey, wait a minute, I hear you, I understand that, but ... In reality, these young filmmakers, this naive wave, as they call them, they're doing stuff that the filmmakers in the 1960s in the United States were doing, or the French New Wave were doing. They're sort of thumbing their nose at tradition, and the difference that's hard for me is that these guys were raised on other social media. They weren't raised on film, essentially in the same ways that we were. So the way that they tell stories is really different. But that kind of like fine nuance is lost in this real desire to destroy your opponent, or what we see as an opponent. Instead of a conversation, all we have are disputes. You can't just kind of like something a little bit. You either have to like it really well, and if you do really like it, you have to like it the right way. I've talked about movies that I've really loved and gotten a lot of pushback saying, "Yeah, you didn't like it the right way," because it's really about this, this, and this, and it can't be about the things that you think it's about. And that's limiting and diminishing. And when everybody is diminished and everybody is angry, and now everybody, there's no space. I think that's the term that you used, and it's exactly right. There's no room to breathe. There's no room of our own to be able to express an opinion without fear of not just pushback, but violent pushback, personal pushback. There are films that I won't review now coming up because I just feel like that's not worth it. But my only job left as a critic is to champion movies like This God Is. I didn't review it. Because even as I was watching, I was thinking, oh, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. It's not for me to say something. But we can't all be siloed all the time, right? If a great Asian American film comes out and every white critic refuses to review it because of the violent hate that they'll get for not getting it from an Asian American point of view, that's going to die. Your movement's going to die. The things that you're most afraid of are going to happen. We need help. We need allies. We need that. And so how are we inclusive? How are we accepting of people on a learning journey? The person that I was 10 years ago, not the person I am today. The things I understood 20 years ago, not the things that I understand now. And I only got here because of people that were patient with me, that were willing to teach me something, to say, hey, you can't use this word. You can't talk about things this way. I forgive you. I see your heart. Let's work towards a better future. Instead of now, I really feel like there would be a lot more, I'm going to kill you because I don't agree with you. Now we're in trouble. Now there's no room. We used to have All in the Family. We used to have Sanford and Son. We used to have ways that we would talk about this. Our culture is completely a la carte now. we only ever have to watch and listen to what we agree with, and that agrees with us, there's no room for discussion anymore. And we're at a point now in our culture, in our civilization, as we see, as a, the high level of cortisol in me at all times. We're in fight or flight at this moment, and we can choose to come together like the Minions do in this great new movie that they have, or we could choose to just fly apart. And too often I wake up thinking the other, but then art sometimes will bring me back and say, okay, there's still people that are fighting and speaking their truth, and that's keeps me going for another day.
I want to name something that I heard in what you just said, Walter. You acknowledged that there were people who were willing to teach you and people who were willing to be patient with you. But what I also heard is that you were willing to be taught. You were willing to be corrected. And I think, James, that sense of humility is what is missing in so many aspects of our lives, but is why in my fight against being overwhelmed and besieged by what we see in the world is why I return to art. How do you see film as art in this era where there are so many things changing? As Nadira mentioned, who's heading a studio, who bypasses a studio to be able to do that? How do you see film as art in this moment?
My sense is that the signs are all there, that the studios are over in a sense of cinema as art. They are focused on making money. They are not really fostering any sort of time spent reflecting, if you like. But I think that the silver lining of the studios becoming more and more like propaganda outlets, there are artists out there. There are people who run independent movie theaters who were greatly endangered, I think, after COVID. Audiences seem to be coming back. If you look at the blogs from people who run art house theaters in the US, but also in other parts of the world, there's a whole different sense of what cinema means and what ideas mean, and that you can actually have a conversation. And I think sometimes it can take the form of staying after the movie and having a discussion. Maybe you have a Zoom group, for example, where it's well moderated, and so you can have a discussion you can have it in a sort of unthreatening atmosphere where it doesn't become a personal issue whereby insults fly or there's contempt of somebody's opinion and so on.
That was James Hanley, co-founder of Cine Studio in Hartford. Nadira Goff is staff writer at Slate. And Walter Chow is senior film critic for FilmFreakCentral.net. Coming up, more from our 4th annual summer movie panel. We'll hear the panelists' recommendations for movies they want more people to see.
It is a gorgeous film. It is smart. It's principled. It's scary. It is one of the great films. And I think a lot of our great films come from this genre.
This is Disrupted. Stay with us. Welcome back to Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. This hour, we're talking about the latest trends in film with our 4th annual summer movie panel. Walter Chow is senior film critic for FilmFreakCentral.net and a film instructor at the University of Colorado, Denver. Nadira Goff is staff writer for Slate. And James Hanley is co-founder of the independent movie theater Cine Studio in Hartford. Here's more of our conversation. My team at Disrupted knows that I do not like horror. If it is anything that could remotely actually happen or take place, I run the other way from it. And somehow I ended up seeing Sinners like 4 times last year because I gradually had to move my hands away from my face. I know myself, and horror has always been that thing. I still blame my aunt who convinced me that Michael Myers lived under my bunk bed and that if I got out of the bed at night, he would grab me. It made no sense, but to a little 6-year-old, it has stuck with me some many years later. I've raised the point about horror, though, because we've talked about obsession and backrooms. But then there are other less mainstream films like Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma. I wanted to make sure I got the whole title right. There is Evil Dead Burn. There are all of these things where it feels like horror is seeing, or even horror adjacent films are seeing this attraction and resurgence, which I think says a lot about where we are right now as sort of cultures and communities and people looking to film, but also the things that we used to think were so absurd feel not so absurd in some ways. What do you make of this sort of attraction to horror right now?
Well, I've always thought of horror as the indicator species in a swamp. You know how, like frogs, they're the first things that show toxicity and contagion and something wrong in the environment because they take things in through their skin. Horror films are like this. They reflect what's wrong with us and what we're afraid of almost instantly, really quickly. And there's this idea that we've always had horror, the best horror in the most troubled spots in the world. You can sort of jump around. You know, there's the Universal monsters in the 30s in America. Japan has had really great horrors ever after World War II. South Korea has legendary horror. The French had their period of extremity in the 90s. So there's this stuff that happens now, I think, throughout that we can watch as cultural critics and say, all right, why is it that America's making so many horror movies right now? I guess it's not actually so difficult to figure out. But horror is also that place where you don't need a big star. You don't need a big director. You don't need a huge budget. Horror is a place where fresh voices can find footing with just a good premise. Yeah, you know, rather than say horror is having a resurgence, I think horror is just like Michael Myers under your bed. Still there, by the way.
You had to bring that up.
Um,
Thank you, Walter. So now I won't go in the basement today, and I no longer have bunk beds. Thank you.
It's always lurking, is what I'm saying. You know, that that's always there. It's always in the back of your head. It takes very little to sort of stir that up again, and we need that release. You know, I love horror more than I think any other genre. I'm a big fan of movies, just good movies, any movies. But I love horror because I think horror tells us truly about who we are and who the filmmakers might be at that moment. I mean, so many of our horror movies now are about rich people or about, you know, jobs that are dead end jobs. We're learning about late capitalism through our horror films. I think we're learning about a lot of this dismay at our leadership, this dismay about the state of threat that we're always under. You know, the beginning of Weapons, that great horror film from last year, right, is a PTA meeting where, you know, a teacher's being called out for her personal. It's just there's a really interesting place where horror lives with us. And I would argue even that the first movies we told to each other as a species, sitting in caves before a flickering light and paintings on a wall, were horror movies where, hey, don't go down the valley, don't go into the forest after dark, don't touch the bear that way. This is the essential way that we learn about things and that we learn survival. So when we feel like the most like we need to survive in some way, some threat, horror is a good place to go. I think the Odyssey, without having seen it, looks a lot like a horror movie to me. He includes the Polyphemus scene, the Cyclops sequence. And I don't know, do they go to the underworld? There's a whole scene in the Odyssey where they go to the underworld and they feed the ghosts, you know, blood that they've sacrificed to. So there's so many horror elements to the Odyssey. If Nolan has made a $200 million horror film that mainstream audiences will go to, all right, I might be coming around to Christopher Nolan.
He said that he got the inspiration for his characters from Guillermo del Toro, which I think tells you anything you like need to know about how incredible hopefully the monsters are going to be in this movie. What I've always loved about genre films more generally, including fantasy, sci-fi, what have you, but I think horror more than those other genres, but genre films more generally, you know, when you have a film that exists on the outskirts, when you have a film that's not going to be taken seriously by the Academy or whatever, then you can kind of just do whatever you want. And so these genres have always been a place where auteurs, you know, kind of cut their teeth on how they're going to make films or the weirdest, wackiest ideas that they have. And I think in an era where we are so bombarded with biopics and superhero films and nostalgia bait, right? I think what audiences yearn for is originality. And there's no better place to find that than in horror or in other sort of weird genre films. And even if you take Sinners, sure, it's a horror slash thriller, but it's also a comedy. It's also kind of a musical. It's also, like all of these sort of different genres as well. And so you see a lot of auteurs really playing in this space. And I think that it makes it so enticing to see a trailer for a film like Weapons, where you're kind of like, I don't even know what's going on right now. And so I'm going to buy a ticket so I can find out, right? Like audiences really, they do still want that. I think that's a large part of what makes all of these movies, these horror films that have survived or at least catapulted based on word of mouth, whether it's, Obsession or Backrooms. I think that's a part of what makes them so enticing to ticket holders and to moviegoers. I don't know. Horror just feels like a playground for filmmakers in a way that, a demented one, but a playground nonetheless, in a way that I think audiences are really starting to understand now that it's becoming more mainstream. They're starting to see that trend, and it really does feel like a pushback to major studios trying to hinge all their financial bets on, these gambles that are the same exact movie we've seen for the past decade over and over again.
I feel like The Demented Playground will be the title of a really great film, Nadira. So I will go if you agree to hold my hand while we watch the film to support.
Absolutely. I never used to be a big horror person, but then I got this job at Slate, and we do a lot of horror reporting, and being sort of one of the younger writers, they just kind of, they're just like, someone has to go watch this horror movie, you go do it. But I've learned to appreciate the genre so much through being forced to
This is why I love this panel, because you all get me to get beyond my fear. I will only see those films in the theaters. I will not watch them in my home, but I will watch them in theater. So we have about a minute and a half left, and I build my summer list based on what you all suggest. So James, I'm going to start with you. What is a film or films that you think has not gotten enough attention that you want more people to see? So I'll start with you, James, and then I'll go around the group.
Well, actually, it has gotten a lot of attention. I think I would tell people to seek out seeing the Odyssey on the largest screen you can for the cinematic experience. Going back to another title we were talking about, I wish that people would revisit Sinners and go and see it on a big screen in a theater. That is a high art. That is a masterpiece of genre, of cinema, of character, and of actual social construct of the United States. I mean, it hits on so many levels. And being a big fan of revivals, I mean, it does show in revivals. And again, you can actually see 70 millimeter prints of that on a big screen. But one last thing I would say about horror films, don't forget the experience of being in a crowded theater and all screaming together. That is something at Cine Studio. We showed a midnight horror show every Friday and Saturday. We first of all showed Night of the Living Dead, and the audience was just floored by that. And the fact of being in a big audience, in a dark place, in the theater, watching this on the screen, it is totally different from any other experience. There's that sense of fright, but also enjoyable fright. It's like a safe place to be frightened.
Well, I will never lead a group in singing, but I am happy to lead them in screaming. Walter, what's a film that you want others to see and that I can add to my list?
I would really recommend Avalon Fast's second film called Camp. They are a young filmmaker. Camp is about a summer camp where a young woman goes and kind of really learns her power and learns her voice amongst other misfits, if you will. And it's gorgeous. It's kind of falls in the horror genre, but it's not an outright horror film. I don't think you'll need to close your eyes at any point of it, but rather there's a scene that I think about a lot where she calls home to talk to her dad and say, hey, you know what? I'm not coming home. And the father says, that makes me happy and sad. And that destroyed me. I have a daughter who doesn't live at home anymore. She's amazingly beautiful and successful and doesn't, is having her life. And every time I talk to her, I feel happy and sad. I'm so thrilled about her life. And I'm so sad that she's not at home anymore. Camp. I don't know if it's open in every place, but it should be coming soon. I also want to throw in for Night of the Living Dead, by the way. I always teach Night of the Living Dead as the best civil rights film that America produced in the 1960s. It is a gorgeous film. It is smart. It's principled. It's scary. It is one of the great films, and I think a lot of our great films come from this genre. Yeah, there's camp. Camp is my answer.
Well, as someone who is preparing to send my daughter off to college next month, that beautifully captures that feeling of being excited and also really paying to see. This is why this list should come with tissues and a little therapy too. This is great.
Yeah.
Nadira, what about you? What should we add to our list? What do you want people to see?
I've got a few. Is God Is, of course, as we've been talking about. If you want a delightful, classic rom-com romp, You, Me, and Tuscany was so fun and lovely, if not reinventing any wheel, but still really lovely. 28 Years Later, Bone Temple, I think was great. I think everything that's been happening with the 28 Years Later franchise has been great. I'm really interested to see Girls Like Girls, which is a queer film that is based on a song by Hayley Kiyoko. Mostly because not only am I a fan of Hayley Kiyoko, but I'm also a fan of the idea of turning a song and extrapolating that into a full piece of cinema. And so I really hope that people actually go out and see that, even if it's not great, just to support and just see that experiment. And speaking of horror, Na Hong-chin we're going to be able to see Hope, his upcoming horror film, later this year. But I urge everyone to, before they go see Hope, which I hope is good, I haven't seen, to rewatch The Wailing, his 2016 horror film, which is so good. It is so good. And one of the things that I've just been interested in, or trying to hold myself more accountable to lately, is watching these great films by creators and then going back and making sure I've seen their earlier films that have actually, given them that critical acclaim or really put their name out there. And I find that I don't do it often enough. And so for Na Hong-chin, if you are going to see Hope later this year, please go back and watch The Wailing. It's incredible. And please try and make that a project that you do for any movie that you've seen from any filmmaker that you like.
I would say that The Wailing is one of those movies that needs a warning label. I felt bad. I felt just bad for months after The Wailing, just like generally bad. It's so good. It is so good.
So I'm furiously writing down all of these titles, but to our listeners, we will include them in the list on the website. I'm always so excited about this panel and grateful that you all have joined us. Nadira Goff is staff writer at Slate. James Hanley co-founded Cine Studio in Hartford. And Walter Chow is senior film critic for FilmFreakCentral.net and a film instructor at the University of Colorado, Denver. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
What an honor to be here.
This episode was produced by Kevin Chang Barnum, Erica McIntosh, and Robin Doyon-Aiken. Meg Fitzgerald is our senior manager of projects and radio programming, and additional production help came from Katie Service. Special thanks to our intern, Amanda Adams. You can listen to more than 250 episodes of Disrupted in our archive. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. From Connecticut Public Radio, this is Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. Thanks for listening.
Stay